and huge objective that India set up for herself. I have some slides that I would like to share with you. Let me please see if you see them.
Yes, we see them. It's all right.
So I'm going to share with you what is our as ENM view on all of these cooperation about hydrogen. And to do this, I will just very briefly tell you what Eni is and what is the position on decarbonization, and then touch on a number of points where we are really active about cooperation and alliance, because we think that substantially we need to work in parallel on several different lines, and these are the lines we might be working on, and then offer some conclusions. So, energy company. And renewables. Of course, now this is not, we are not talking about Eni, so you can find this information everywhere. But what I would like to really start up we adopted an approach that is a little bit unique among other major energy companies, in that we stated clear and verifiable goals to go to net zero 2050, but the very important things in these slides are two things. First of all, that we are addressing scope 1, 2, and 3. Very briefly means scope 1 is what you are emitting yourself. Scope 2 is the emission from the energy, CO2 emission from the energy and heat that you might be importing from outside. And scope 3 is really emission throughout the whole value chain. So it's really a life cycle approach. And we believe, strongly believe, that this is really the only way in which decarbonization should be addressed, substantially to avoid something which is very nasty, which is called carbon leakage, which means substantially that you stop emitting yourself because you make someone else emit on your behalf. What we want to avoid is exactly this. We want to have a broad view and do whatever we can to reduce the overall but we are doing in other parts of the world. These countries have their own specific features, and decarbonization must take into account those characteristics. This may be called those complementarity. So anyone is doing what he can, but with its own strategy points. So just to make an example of this, not all natural gas is the same. We have fugitive emissions, and different natural gases coming from different parts of the world have completely different fugitive emissions. And this is a very important point also for hydrogen, for blue hydrogen. Blue hydrogen with gas coming from some region is a good thing, from other regions is absolutely useless. The same is for the renewable energy mix. Norway has complete failure. And what we are really doing in Liverpool Bay and in other parts, for example in Ravenna Hub in Italy, is exactly the same. Ravenna Hub, by the way, in Italy is a much larger area with thousands of hectares, because in Italy we have a lot of small, medium enterprise. So we have a huge amount of hectares, a huge infrastructure, for example, for gathering CO2 and transporting hydrogen, that has to be set up in the proper way. And this calls for a global cooperation in the cluster, in the region that we are considering. In this case, for example, we are also working with SNAP for converting and repurposing the network as far as we can. Then there is another level of cooperation, which is also extremely important, which stems from this. We all know that we don't have available all the technologies that we need. In the first part of the slide, there is a citation from the International Energy Agency. Substantially, we are lacking more or less half of the technologies that we need. So we might just wait, but this is just a waste of time. We have to increase the pay. And so this makes very important to identify partners, and we are doing this. We have set up cooperation agreements with the top integrators and energy players, but also considering technologies. And what is important is also to highlight that we concentrate on technologies. We have market leaders, we might have medium-sized players, but with specific features which might be very good for local reasons, and also new technology, some visionary new technologies. I think might be of interest, let's say, as a side experience, which is not international cooperation, but it's cooperation inside of the company. When you have a huge companies, sometimes you produce different ideas, different technologies along parallel lines. And for example, in the past, we have industrialized a technology which is called EST for converting heavy residues into clean products, so to be less carbon intensive. But in parallel, we have also developed a technology which produces a syngas with lower OPEX and CAPEX than common steam reformers. When we started tackling the decarbonization task, we understood something previously unknown to us, that this can play together very well. I just want to, in this small chart, highlight a point, which is when we talk about pragmatic. What do we mean with a pragmatic approach? You will see later this word. Is a sort of there is a sort of Pareto law, I don't know if you know it, which says that sometimes you can get 80% of the result with 20% of the effort. It's true in many cases that this is the case, and for this particular case, carbon capture with this key gas and gas technologies achieve 80% of the objective of carbon reduction with a much more limited effort than green hydrogen. This does not mean that green hydrogen is not the final target, but means that we need to walk this path, not just know what the end should be. And we believe that being pragmatic in many cases means going straight, then concentrate later on improvements. Then just to change the level of alliance or cooperation that we are setting up is related to creation of actors. And for example, with the Massachusetts technology in Boston, but we also created a company based in Boston with a specific task, a new visionary technologies. So not something that is already the spread of time. We simply have to identify, cherry pick what is really of interest. Then another level of cooperation that we think is of relevance to speak about, it has already been mentioned, is regulatory cooperation. cooperation and understanding. This is an example which might be useful, let's say, to set up the concept. We have technology, we are using technology to transform some used cooking oils and wastes with hydrogen into biofuel. And this from a point of view of CO2 emission, EQT will decrease substantially to 1/4 in between the gray bar and the red bar, 1/4 of the emission. But the point is that there is a remaining, a residual potential to further reduce the emission by changing the type of hydrogen, or from gray hydrogen to blue or green. But current regulations do not normally recognize this. So only in some specific case, for example in California, this is recognized, but the life cycle approach is not often recognized. And this is bad because you might make an improvement, but this improvement, or also in previous speeches, but it's very important that regulators start understanding the chain of CO2 emission along the whole scope and change the regulation to recognize that for these things. And then another absolutely important level, and we are strongly working because this is long-standing cooperations and large efforts. You can see the dates here, no? So are very, very recent.
And I will start with you, Pandey.